Good afternoon. Welcome to Business Builders Weekly. My name is Kirk Jewell. I'm the Chief of People here at All True, and I am excited to be with you again this week. This has been a great conversation. The last 3 weeks, this is part 3 of this series of interview like your business depends on it, because it doesn't hurt to ask. The reality is that a lot of times in our business, whether it's interviewing or crucial conversations in our business, whether it's with a team member, a candidate, or somebody in our business, whether that's internal or external with clients, a lot of times we have a tough time having those crucial conversations, that asking the tough questions, being there to really hold the central cornerstones of our business, the mission, vision, and core values. If you've been with us the last couple of weeks, you've learned a couple of things. One, you've learned that it's important to ask open-ended questions. Why, when, what, where, how? Walk me through it. Help me understand. Pursuing our goals of getting information by really asking from a place of curiosity versus interrogation. Last week we went over the 3 Ps, really how to frame those questions and having conversations that reveal motive, context, and character. The 3 Ps being past, process, and personal belief. If you are here today, we're excited to have you along for this journey. If you were not here for the first 2 conversations and 2 parts of this series, I would encourage you to go to YouTube, look us up. These have been posted. I would say just based on client feedback and participant feedback from the last couple of weeks, these have been really valuable conversations, not only from clients that have already started to implement them in their meetings internally, but we've got a couple of clients that have already reached out and said, hey, I've been interviewing for the last couple of weeks, and having these tools in my toolbox have been incredibly impactful. So I want to kind of set that up in the sense of, I hope you're getting value out of these conversations, because the goal is truly to give you more tools than you came in with and give you a couple of more arrows in your quiver as you attack the marketplace in your specific discipline. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. Let me get my screen shared as we jump into this 3rd part of this series. And I want to both prime you for this conversation. We are going to have an opportunity to have some question development in kind of the midpoint of this conversation. And I would encourage you, if you don't already have it, have a pen and paper ready. What I want to encourage this is you will see the value, if you've spent any time around me at all, whether it's through this series or prior to, or even beyond today, you will know that I find a lot of value in writing things down, writing it out, whether you type it out, you're completely digital, or writing it on physical paper, but getting your thoughts on paper, getting those questions out for consistency, clarity, and then ultimately having confidence going into what can be very difficult conversations. The discovery process. So as we jump in today, think of this less in regards to having conversations for the sake of conversations. A lot of times what I find is that we have conversations and we tend to feel very comfortable, confident when we stay a foot deep and a mile wide. I'm often reminded of this when it comes to doing networking events or possibly neighborhood happy hours. For myself, we do a monthly happy hour in the neighborhood. We have a very engaged community. We have about 170 or so neighbors in a membership on Facebook. We have a lot of dialogue around who's doing what, when, where, and how. With that, each one of these conversations that we're having, we want to go in with a discovery process. Every conversation is a process of discovery. It's really looking at our conversations, our relationships with this heart of curiosity. It's how can I know more coming out than what I do coming in? So the best leaders and hiring managers use interviews or conversations to uncover alignment of values, character, and long-term integration, not just skills or surface capabilities. When we're talking about interviews, a lot of times when we're going into those interviews, and I'll be very candid with you, I've been guilty of this in the past where you get something thrown on your calendar by maybe it's an HR coordinator, maybe it's an Indeed invite that you didn't know that you were signing up for open calendar, and they just book something on your calendar. You peek at the candidate resume and you're looking, seeing if they've got the right competencies, maybe the necessary skills or ability or experience. But how do we uncover and unearth, how do we tease out the alignment with our values? With all true partners, we have very specific core values. And so when we're looking at a candidate, we're looking for them to be able to align with those core values. We have 7 specifically, and it starts with their ability to embolden people around them, but also act out of boldness. And then as a result, our final core value is results driven. Not necessarily that it's all about the results internally, but it's about them having this heart of an advocate and driving asymmetrical results for our clients. So the best leaders use these conversations to unearth this alignment, unearth character that maybe we're not aware of. And then ultimately looking at long-term integration. We know for each one of our team members, as well as our clients, they need to be able to integrate into what All True is doing from a mission and vision standpoint in order to do that long-term integration or integrate long-term and have long-term success with our business. They need to be able to first integrate culturally. Are the things that are important to us important to them? Meaning, are they others focused? Is success something bigger than just the money in the bank account? Is it something bigger than just their success factor? Is it about bigger purpose? Is it about advocating for people in their business, for their family, for their legacy? Operationally, they have to be able to integrate in with us operationally in the sense that do they believe in the value of systems, of process, of our way of building out a business to scale? And then ultimately, are they financially aligned? Are we able to integrate not only the value proposition of what we're doing, but ultimately, do they integrate financially in the sense that our mission, vision, and values are aligned from a financial standpoint? Meaning, do they find more value in vanity posts of planes, trains, and automobiles? Or is it something bigger than that? For us at All True, you will find spending any amount of time around us, it's less about our revenue targets in the sense of how much we've generated, and it's more about, and the thing that we get most excited about is our ability to give. So if you look at our vision, our revenue vision for 10 years is to be able to, at that point, be able to gift $10 million a year into the causes and areas of community that we find a lot of value in putting our investments in. For us, that's foster and adoptive care. It's eradicating and eliminating human trafficking. Those are two very heavy things that aren't normally aligned with business, but for us, it's deeply personal, it's deeply meaningful. So as we launch into these conversations, we want to go in with a process of discovery. Know your right from your left. Again, I love a play on words. So what is right? What does right look like for you? Understanding the foresight in what you write down, and then knowing how to leverage what you write down to understand and discover in that process. For candidates or team members that are already in your business, are they self-aware? Do they know themselves? Sometimes this comes in the form of personality assessments. We subscribe to DISC assessments, so understanding their dominant personality. What do they want to be communicated as? How do they want to be communicated to? And then, are they coachable? How do they take feedback? Are they mission-centered? Meaning, our mission is to help businesses succeed on purpose, allowing them to succeed with both integrity and altruism. Are they mission-centered? And then resourceful. Are they solution-oriented or are they problem-oriented? I think we can all agree that we've hired our fair share of team members or had teams that we've been a part of that the team members are seemingly more problem identifiers than problem solvers. So how resourceful are they as candidates? So as we create these scenarios in our interview process, as we're going through these discovery type of conversations, and we approach those conversations with curiosity, are they resourceful? And then on the client side, because we don't want to excuse the internal from the external, do they value our process? When we're talking to construction or home services or marketing firms or different areas and industries of business, do they appreciate the fact that you have a process that you're leading them through? Is there value in the construct and the exit of chaos? Do they seek partnership with you? And I use my own example of being a homeowner and going through really 3 phases of a renovation. I had to find a contractor, construction workers, plumbers, electricians that didn't look at me and my project that was deeply personal as just another sale, just another invoice to submit a PO to. I was looking for people that were willing to partner on this bigger vision. I wasn't doing my renovation in one fell swoop and allocating really 2.5 years of successive time. I really had to do it into 3 phases, both from a budgetary standpoint, but also an operational standpoint. So looking for those points of integration, going back to the earlier part of this conversation, were they able to integrate into me financially and operationally? Clients, are they financially ready? Do they have the budget? Do they have the funding, whether that's in loan or cash, to make this relationship viable for both sides? And what it ultimately comes down to is, are they willing to change their current state? A lot of times when we don't approach our conversations with this discovery process, we can find that they have the desire to get the result. They might have the wherewithal or the financial backing to get the result, but they're not willing to go through the pain of change. Meaning, maybe it's a renovation. Maybe it is changing their business model. If you're in marketing, maybe it's changing the platforms that they're getting results from. If it's in plumbing, maybe they have to give up something to get something else. Maybe they have to give up 2 days of hot showers to get a reverse osmosis, a water filtration system, and a new water heater. Maybe they have to give up something to get something. So are they willing to change? For hiring, this could sound like these discovery questions. Tell me about a time you took initiative without being told. What drove you? Again, we're trying to unearth these things, and I would give you all the same feedback. Write down your questions. For me, I do all of our hiring and I do all of the interviewing up to our core values alignment interview. Then we bring in our leadership team. That candidate will then have a conversation with that candidate to see if they're able to align with our core values, because now we've identified that they're culturally aligned, they're operationally aligned, and now we have to understand, are they core values aligned? So for hiring, I write down all of my questions. I have the what I call scorecards, a list of questions. These are 8 to 10 questions that I ask every candidate. The first interview, pretty standard stuff. It's all the same 8 to 10 questions for every candidate, depending on, regardless of the position that they're coming into. Operational or case study, it's more of a role play interview. That's 8 to 10 scenario-based questions. I'm putting them in that seat. So for hiring, what kind of feedback is hardest for you to receive? Another way to ask this is, how do you receive feedback well? Again, going back to the previous slide, it's are they coachable? Are they willing to take feedback? And once they receive the feedback, how likely are they to implement that feedback? And for sales alignment, again, we can be in this state, in that startup phase where it's all about what and trying to value press or pressure test our value proposition to the market. We'll take on any client, and that's appropriate for a time. But once you get through that third pressure point in your business where you're doing between $1 and $3 million in revenue, then it becomes about that client alignment. So we would ask the client, what does success really look like for you in this engagement or this project? We want to understand what success looks like on the other side of them putting their signature on that dotted line. It's really easy to say, well, just press hard. I'll give you your yellow copy and we'll get started. But really understanding what success looks like for our client on the other end of the project or engagement or contract. And then what would make this relationship break down? And how can we prevent that? We talked about last week framing and priming the question. We frame up the question in a way that allows us to know if we've satisfied the answer, if we've satisfied this relationship. So this question is really more about framing what success looks like. So what would make this relationship break down? I'm getting their negative feedback so I can solve for it before it even becomes a thing. And then how can we prevent that? I am actively problem solving because this client, this customer knows how they've been let down in the past. The best thing that you can do from a project manager or an owner signing a new contract with a new client is to have that client tell you what their bad experience has been without saying, hey, I know you've engaged XYZ industry, the one that I service, and you've had bad experiences. That's why we're even having this conversation. I want to know what those bad things were, those negative impressions on this client are, and I can go ahead and either assure them of the solve because I've got a unique value proposition that's different than my competitors, or I'm just allowing them to tell me how I can best serve them and win their business, not only today, but in 6 or 12 months when that contract or project renews. So an activity. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. We're going to take a slight break. We're 25 minutes into this, but we're going to take a slight break because I want you to write 3 alignment questions for your specific culture. These are alignment questions for the hiring process. So these are open-ended questions. What, why, when, where, how. And then I want you to write 3 alignment questions for your specific offer. Maybe you've got a push to do front yards, or maybe you've got a push to do backyards, or maybe you've got a push to do water softeners, or marketing campaigns, or websites, or whatever your industry is. You have a specific offer that you're launching maybe in the next week. Maybe you've launched it already for Q3. Maybe you've got one coming up in Q4 to wrap out the year. But what 3 alignment questions for your specific culture, so that are aligned culturally, operationally, financially, or specific to your offer? What, why, when, where, how alignment questions for your offer. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. We're going to put on some question writing music, and then we're going to get started, and I'll be back at 10:30 or 30 minutes after the hour. All right. Hopefully, we've got some questions that have been baked out. I'd love a volunteer if I can get one. Otherwise, I might have to volunteer. All right. Asha, you look like you are sitting there waiting so patiently for me to call on you. I know you're great. Oh man, we're doing accounting while listening. I appreciate that. Well, with that, again, I want to jump back into the second half of our conversation today. And really, it comes down to asking those open-ended questions. How are we allowing our people to be discovered? The best gift that we can give anybody is the ability to be seen and known. And so when we're doing these conversations, when we're having these conversations, it really is that ability to allow people in our world, our environment, our culture to be seen and known. So let's jump back in. Let me get my screen shared again. We'll jump right back into the second half of this conversation. Awesome. So diagnose before you prescribe. Here's the thing. We all have been to a doctor. And I will tell you that if a doctor is prescribing before they see you, that is a recipe for malpractice. So prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. Leaders don't solve problems by assuming. We've all heard the adage that to assume is to break that word down, is to make an ass out of you and me. Assume. They diagnose before they prescribe. They get to know the facts. They get to collect the context of the situation before putting forth a solution. Asking diagnostic questions. Asking those diagnostic questions equips leaders to gather the full picture before taking action. The reality of this is that if we are to take action, we need to have enough context to draw out the facts. Because if you've had any employees or any kids or any humans for that matter in your life, which we all have, so I'm collecting everybody in this statement, you've had somebody in your life that either maybe they changed the facts, or maybe they omit some of the truth to paint themselves in a slightly more positive light. I know for me, I've got 7 kids, and they are not always the most transparent of communicators. Sometimes they will omit something that either has been done to them or what they have done to another. So it's really important to, again, dovetailing off of this diagnosis in the process of discovery, it's really about making us really gaining enough context to do this well. So prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. So question types. Again, let's go into 5 question types to really gain that clarity and allow us to get confidence in our next move. So a clarifying question. You know me. Walk me through what happened, step by step. Again, this is a clarifying question, and this only starts a series of clarifying questions. Walk me through what happened. Walk me through it step by step so I can understand. Again, coming at it from a place of curiosity, of discovery, of really unearthing the details that maybe our disclosure unit, the person giving us this disclosure or debrief, Maybe we can start to identify inconsistencies. Let's go into root cause. Like, what is this really about? And how do we do it? So, what do you believe caused this outcome? Giving our audience permission to take lead in the conversation. What do you believe caused this outcome? I may or may not, as the leader or business owner, know just from experience or from knowing all of the information on the backside. Maybe I've looked into the QuickBooks, or maybe I've looked into the CRM to see what this is before I'm having the conversation. But really, I want to unroot or unearth the root cause of these things. So what do you believe caused this outcome? A consequence type of question. What happens if we don't address this right now? We have all had the situation where we've got either a family member, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a team member, maybe it's one of the leaders in our business. It's always a 5-alarm fire. I would say if we go back to the DISC assessment and identifying personality traits and those dominant personalities, typically if we get all 5-alarm fires, or we get all things that need to be addressed with a fire hose, these are high influence, high influential type of people, those high I people. They love telling stories. Not necessarily that the story is untrue, but they love to have everything right now. It's got to be done. It's a 5-alarm fire. Let's attack it now. But as leaders, we need to have the discipline to have these types of questions in our pocket. What happens if we don't address it right now? Is anybody going to die? I have a little saying that I say in HR, but as bad as things can go, things may be going really poorly. Maybe we have team members that are leaving. Maybe we have to fire somebody, which is the worst day. Maybe you have to have a difficult conversation and start that discipline journey. But that saying is, nobody's dying in HR. And even when you do have to navigate that, it truly is an opportunity. If we see each one of these difficult conversations as a platform for leadership and a platform to have these difficult conversations well, because we've prepared through different modalities like training, like reading, like putting ourselves in case study or role play scenarios, we're going to navigate those a lot better. And then belief-oriented type of questions. What do you believe is the right issue, is the real issue behind this? So what do you believe really is behind this? So really helping us understand what they believe about the situation versus just telling them what they should believe about the situation. So belief-oriented, what do they believe versus what do they feel? What do they think? And I want to pause right here to distinguish those two words very specifically. When I have somebody that addresses me with, I think, I appreciate that you think this, but do you believe that this is actually the thing? Or do you believe it's something else? Because belief requires activity. Belief requires an action. Belief generates compulsion. Thinking about something is just a precursor to a belief. A feeling, if somebody says that I feel this way, one, they're probably a fairly intelligent communicator if they communicate through I feel, because feelings are non-competitive. They cannot be argued with, but they also can be liars. What I mean by that is facts don't care about your feelings, but feelings do care about your fears, and fears are liars. So let me say that again. Facts don't care about your feelings, and feelings do care about your fears, and fears are liars. So what do you believe is the real issue behind this? Again, we're going at this from a place of discovery versus the assumptive, well, I know that this went wrong because of, I know this went wrong because this, and this is what you did or said or behaved like in front of the client or a team member, coming at it from that side of it. And then systemic or a system flaw type of question. What option does this happen? Or is it part of a larger pattern? How does this happen? How does this happen? Is this something that is just a now thing, or is this something that's a part of a bigger pattern that we're starting to identify in our business or in our process, or maybe both? I'm going to teach you a little bit of a power I actions. So intention, information, insight leads to action. So intention, information, insight. So those build on top of each other. We want to have great intention. We want to have the intention of an advocate. We want to have the heart of an advocate as a great leader. So intention, what are my intentions for asking these questions? Once I ask the question, what am I going to do with the information? And once I have the information, what insights am I going to glean from this information, and how are those insights going to drive my action? So I call these the power I actions. Information gathered through intentional questions isn't useful unless it's turned into actionable direction. It's great to have information. I am somewhat of a hoarder of great information. I love to read. I love to learn. It is both my superpower and my kryptonite all at the same time. Anybody that spends any time around me knows that I know a little bit about a lot of things. That can also be a kryptonite if I love the accumulation of information without the volume of required action. I do something, and it's funny, I actually did this last night with my kids. So imagine 5 kids around a table, there's 7 of us sitting at dinner, and we're going through the day. It was a Wednesday. We go through what went great today, and we go around to the kids. Well, then, if you had one opportunity to redo one thing from today, what would you do? The next step to that is, how would you redo it if you had an opportunity to redo it? And so this is collecting information in that reflection or insight, and then what would they do differently? One, this creates between the ages of 9 and 14, this creates an opportunity for us to gain insight, but also, how are we going to change our behavior? How are we going to better align what we want to happen as an outcome with our necessary action towards that outcome? It's really easy to identify, again, the problem with our actions and how it didn't work out for us this time. But it's another thing to problem solve and really understand, okay, I didn't like the way that this felt, or I didn't like the way that this worked out, whether that's a grade or a revenue outcome, we didn't get the offer letter back from the candidate that we were very excited about. If we didn't like the outcome, how are we using these insights to gain clarity, to prioritize our next moves, but also how are we taking leadership, both from an accountability and a discipline, to make sure and ensure that we're results driven at the end of the day? So next step, we have these conversations. I think it's really It's easy to walk away from maybe a great conversation, maybe a not so great conversation. But as leaders, it's really important for us to take the next step in that conversation, which is reflection. So now that I've stated my intention for why I need to have the conversation, I've gained the information, I've gained the insight from that information, I've taken action on it, and now we have to deal with or grapple with the outcome. So these post-conversation insights, I want to give you a framework of 3 things to ask of the outcome of these conversations. What did I learn about values and mindset, both internally and of our listener, of the person that we're having the conversation with? What strengths or gaps were revealed, both in my leadership as well as in a hiring situation? What strengths did I or gaps did I reveal out of my questions of this candidate? Maybe there's gaps in competencies. We've been hiring and I've been doing hiring coaching for the better part of a little over a decade now. What I find most is that we are really easy to find strengths in candidates when we have a gap in our business. Maybe we're trying to fill a hole. Maybe we need a CPA, or maybe we need a salesperson, or maybe we need XYZ role, and it's a problem. It's, yes, Asha, it's desperation. We're trying to throw a person at our problem. And I can tell you firsthand, I can tell you from the other side of bad decisions, you cannot solve your problems with people. You can identify gaps, and you can fill gaps with competencies. You can identify strengths, and you can deploy those strengths, but those strengths never come without opportunities or weaknesses. So as I'm going through and I'm reflecting on these interviews, it's really easy as an interviewer, as a hiring manager, to identify the strengths. A lot of people will tell you their strengths, whether that's in the form of an interview or straight up in a resume. It's like the Instagram version of a person's career. The resume, it's a highlight reel. It's all the things that you should love about me, and hopefully you don't ask the question about what happened when it didn't go right. But we need to understand the gaps. There's a saying in England, mind the gap, and they're obviously talking about minding the gap of the tube, the public transportation train. But we need to mind the gap in our conversations. What questions did we ask, and what gaps were revealed through our questions? And then how does this affect my next decision? Whether it's a hire, maybe it's an offer, both internally to a candidate, or maybe it's an offer that we're putting out in the marketplace. Do we need to restructure what we're hiring for? Maybe, and I'll give you an example. I was working with a client not too long ago, but it had been kind of identified that they wanted to bring in a bookkeeper. That's great. We're growing, we're scaling. We need a bookkeeper to go on the back side of our accounting department. This is great. We have all of the interview questions, but in that, we started to unearth that they don't necessarily need a bookkeeper, but they actually need to fill 2 roles with half capacity. So we needed a bookkeeper as well as an AP/AR clerk. That's a very unique mix, because we're looking for essentially a clerk that has a growth mindset, but also has enough of the competencies of a bookkeeper to be able to bridge that gap. So maybe we need to restructure our offer. Maybe we have an offer out in the marketplace for a promotion that we're running. And after the first week, we're getting great activity on the Instagram or the Facebook, the ads that we're posting. But then we identify that, we're actually lower in our profitability on these deals, and are we okay with that? Maybe we had a target of being 15% net profit and we come back and we're less than a two-figure net profit. That's going to be hard to scale because unless we're okay as a business taking this as our loss leader, as a top of funnel, we might need to restructure. And then having the leadership, accountability, and discipline to pause. As we reflect on these things, asking these three questions. What did I learn about values and mindset of both myself? How disciplined am I in this process? What strengths and gaps were revealed through this? And how does this affect my next decision? If we can be disciplined in this reflection point, then we can be confident in our next actions and move at speed. So in a hiring scenario, the insight might be the candidate resists ambiguity. In a startup environment, ambiguity is like almost a competence that you need to come in with. Ability to navigate ambiguity or less than direction, be a self-starter, all of those things. The strategy might be to place them in a structured role, not a startup style one. So 2 roles in our business. On the finance side, very structured, but it's also very intentional because the mindset of a finance or a high analyzer on the DISC assessment, they need structure. As we onboard, they need parameters. What do I do versus what do I not do? The other side of that is we have a sales and marketing stakeholder. They don't necessarily want the structure, but they need it. But they also need to know the fence posts in order to know where they can be creative versus where the fence line is, so they can get right up to the fence line, but not give up their creativity. On the client side, they want transformation, but resist giving up control. Have we ever had a client like that, where they want all the benefits of everything that you can bring from an expertise and a competency and a value proposition, but they also want to tell you when to post your ads or when to post their job postings or what time of day to make the offer live on Meta. They want to tell you all the things that they have done and how they did it, and they want you to just deploy that while also contending that they want the transformation that is inside of your value proposition. The strategy to this might be to set a phased scope with clear decision checkpoints. In construction and home services, this is called phased billing, where we have a scope of work for each phase of the project. And so we're having these checkpoints, we're having these touch bases to measure success in that last checkpoint, as well as launching into that next phase. And we're gaining that cash flow in the meantime. So each one of these, once we gain the insight, we come up with a strategy based on that new insight. It would be irresponsible to collect the intention or have the intention, collect the information, gain the insight, and then not have a strategy for the action or even the necessary levels of action throughout that scope of work. So our last activity, I know we're right up at time, but I'm going to launch you into the next week before we wrap up this conversation next week in Business Builders Weekly. But I want you to ask the 3 whats. Write 3 whats after your conversations. What did I learn? What's the risk or opportunity from this conversation? And what's my next move? What did I learn? What are my risks? And what's the next move? Again, taking intentionality, we're buttoning that to gaining information, into taking out the insights from that information, and then we're taking action. Once we take that action, we need to reflect. What went right? What did I learn? What went wrong? What's my next move? And then just a bonus, because I love scoreboards, scorecards, anything with a score. I'm highly competitive as a person, so I love keeping score. I would recommend, if you've made it this far in the series of this conversation, build a scorecard, build some sort of mechanism to identify patterns across candidates, clients, or teams over time. For myself, I have a full-blown tracker for each candidate that enters the candidate journey of Alltrue. I have scorecards for every phase of the interview process. So whether they're coming into that discovery phase or exploring through the role play phase or the case study, the scenario-based questions, or they've entered that core values alignment phase where we are having them really unearth their alignment with our core values, and ultimately we need to make a decision. The question we're asking or trying to answer in that scenario is, will this person be successful in this environment? You should be asking that same question not only of your candidates, but also of your clients. Can this person be successful in my environment? Can this person be successful as a customer with my value proposition? And we should be able to have great clarity in them being able to take the next steps, great confidence in their ability to have success with us, and be able to move forward very confidently into the next steps of that solution. I hope you got tons of value from this conversation today. Again, join us next time for this conversation of being able to interview like your business depends on it. Doesn't hurt to ask. Join us next week for the conclusion of this conversation, and your willingness to dive into is your willingness to succeed on purpose. Thank you. Have a great week.